Good morning, people. Okay, so I'm Billy from Invictus Cycling and Performance and all that. And after the really long keto video, a whole bunch of questions. So we're going to answer one mainly in regards to brown fat and white fat. So does anybody know why babies don't shiver? Like babies, like new ones, right? They're super small, they come out, no shivering. And there's a real reason, and it's ultimately because they're loaded with brown fat. So we're going to talk about the difference between brown and white, what you have to do, where the extremes are, and then I guess some baby stuff. So in medicine, we take warming babies really, really seriously. And I'm not, please don't go back and be like, Billy said we don't have to do that. I didn't say that. But hospitals and clinical people are always biased. So I teach this all the time when I talk about 12-lead EKG or health screenings. Anything where you're looking for an issue in somebody that's otherwise healthy. Because in medicine, especially people who are used to treating sick people come in with a complaint. And when you have a complaint or an issue, then you're able to find whatever the reason is, attach that reason to the issue, and then you treat the patient off of whatever the issue is. So that's always going to bias you into looking for something that's wrong. And so when a baby, otherwise healthy baby in the hospital, is new, they warm them up, super warm, and you'll often hear people say it's because they don't shiver, and they can't control their body temperature because somehow shivering is the only way. But it's not the only way. We all regulate our body temps all the time, and most of us do it without shivering. So for a really, really long time, people understood the mechanism as to why babies don't shiver. And they knew it was because they had fat that was called brown fat. And that fat is very different than the fat that we're used to. So let's talk about white fat first. White fat is what we all know and love. We don't love it, right? Everybody's trying to get rid of it. It's single, big, fatty, oily. I mean, of course it's fat, but oily molecules. It has a role in keeping you warm, right? The more that you have, the warmer that you're going to be. It has a role in hormonal control. And then that's about it, right? Stored energy. It exists all over. I did make a mistake when I said visceral fat, right? So white fat is typically visceral fat. It's subcutaneous. It's all that stuff you store. It's the stuff you want to get rid of for spring break and summer and bikini season and all that. You want to get rid of it. Brown fat is very different. It is a whole bunch of oily molecules. It's not just one big one. And it acts more like muscle tissue in that it has mitochondria. And those mitochondria, of course, expend tons and tons of energy. The mitochondria that's found in brown fat has the ability to pull glucose out of your bloodstream. Think about that, right? So when you look at somebody that's diabetic, well, if they had the ability to regulate their blood glucose from healthy fat, you essentially could get rid of diabetes. It's kind of the idea there. So they have mitochondria, they use energy, and we know that this is how babies regulate their body temperature without shivering, because they don't shiver. So when a baby gets cold, its brown fat ramps its metabolism. Metabolism goes up. It goes up quite a bit because there's all those mitochondria and they're all cranking out ATP, and then the kid gets warm, right? Because the byproduct of ATP production or energy production is heat. And so the kid's able to regulate his temp. So baby doesn't shiver. If you didn't know babies didn't shiver, now you know. It's one more service we offer here at the Invictus office, hence the Forerunner. Okay, so what does this have to do with adults? Until about 10 or 20 years ago, you would have been told that adults don't have brown fat. Brown fat's a baby thing. And when babies get rid of all that cute pudginess, then there's no more brown fat. You don't have any. And so I guess the only way you can keep warm is to put a jacket on or shiver. But with advances in MRI essentially better MRI machines. They're able to now see that people have, adults, certain adults especially have, hang on, I'm not going to sneeze. Certain adults have the ability to, well, they have brown fat. They have it. How do they have it? Well, it's almost the same types of adults. It's adults who exercise a lot, and it's adults that live in cold environments where they're regularly exposing themselves to cold. And this is, of course, it's hard to talk about the extremes of physiology with talking about Navy SEAL types. So if you think about, there's really two, I guess, groups of people who are advocating kind differently, but they may not realize they're advocating this, but they're advocating the conversion of white fat to brown fat, or what may be just the increase of brown fat that just destroys white fat, right? Because as the brown fat wants to increase metabolism, it's going to get glucose from your bloodstream, but it's also going to pull white fat for energy. So that's fantastic, right? So the more brown fat you have, white fat goes down. So who are these two groups of people? So Navy SEALs are an interesting bunch. So one of the things they do, and if you're not a Navy, like if you're like a Green Beret, like great, I don't know. I'm specifically talking about the Navy SEALs that go swim in the cold water at the beach, right? You see it on TV all the time. They're middle of winter, they're in the beach, it's super cold, they're in the water, and they're rolling around in the sand and the water and stuff. And it's easy to just think that that's just, go be mean to those guys and they'll come out tougher in the end. Okay, and those guys may believe that because they're all 18, 19, 20 years old, and somebody said, go jump in the water, and so they did. But there's real physiology there. And so a smarter approach, but same thing, if you follow a guy named Wim Hof, he's like, I think he's from Finland or northern Siberia or something. He's kind of crazy, but I use crazy in a different, it's kind of normal. And so he's the guy, he has like 20-something Guinness World Records, and it's all about swimming under the ice and cold exposure. And there's a lot of science on him, and we could go on. This could turn into another 30-minute thing if I talked all about that. But the thing that's common amongst those same two people, the Wim Hof disciples and the Navy SEALs, is they're actually advocating two things. One is they are putting their bodies in a position where they can convert white fat to brown fat very efficiently. And so while jumping into the cold water is not all that fun, it forces their metabolism to ramp up. And the mechanism in that, as long as they're not shivering, is brown fat production. That's it. So cold exposure is the number one way to convert white fat to brown fat. And if you want to drop weight fast, I've said this, I keep saying it, just take cold showers. And you'll do that. But the other thing that they're doing, and kind of the other side to this, is they're actually also learning to control their parasympathetic nervous system, which is something we don't really think about a lot. But it's extremely important, especially for an ultra endurance athlete to do. You have to be able to control your mind, number one, and your parasympathetic nervous system, so that you can do things that other people may not be able to do, or that other people may think are crazy or abnormal. Things like stopping a sneeze, right? So if you're about to sneeze and you stop that sneeze, if you can hold your breath for 2 minutes, hold it for 4. Like, you won't die. Just hold your breath, right? But you've got all this like stimulation that occurs to tell you to like, hey, take the next breath. But you can learn to hold your breath for a really long time and do so without dying. By learning to control that parasympathetic stimulus. And so that's what those guys are learning. They're doing those two things in that. Lena and I, on the Divide in 2015, when we were tandem, left Abiquiu, and on the climb out of Abiquiu, which is a really horrific section of the Divide if you hit it when it's hot. It wasn't hot. In fact, it rained on us almost the whole time. Just a nice, gentle rain. I mean, we just cruised up the Polvadera Mesa like no problem. There was no sand. It was all hard packed. I've never seen it like that. So we flew pretty much up there, and when we got to the top, this crazy storm just nailed us. We couldn't ride. Lightning was super close, and so we put the bike down, and basically lightning protocol, and went to try to like not die. And the next thing I knew, we had just feet of water coming down the road. The bike was underwater. All of our sleeping bags were wet. All of our clothes were wet. We were wet and cold. And so we had to immediately, of course, get warm. And so we did it by jumping up and down and jumping jacks. And it's pouring down rain. And we're trying not to get hit by lightning. And just the whole thing was really kind of a mess. But of course, in that type of scenario, which happens on the Divide pretty frequently, the ability to stay warm, even though your clothes are all wet, is extremely important. And so having brown fat to ramp your metabolism, and then of course the mental control to just keep going, whether you're cold, wet, tired, or hungry, gives you massively more options than somebody who doesn't have brown fat. And when you look at two athletes, one with brown fat and one without brown fat, the brown fat athlete is always going to be more adaptable because of those same two things that typically kind of go together, especially in an adult that's trying to convert white to brown. So anyway, go take your cold showers. How cold does it have to be? There's a good one. Okay, so if you want the parasympathetic part, it's got to be super cold. Just turn your hot water off and jump in. And you're going to jump in, and the cold water is going to hit you, and you're going to take a deep breath, because that's the reflex. You have better parasympathetic control when you're hit by the cold water and you don't take the deep breath. You're like, I got this. Yes, it's cold. And in a few minutes, it'll feel warm. It will. You just have to stick with it. Some people just, they can't. They're like, oh my God, I did it, and I almost threw up. And all. And yes, it can be brutal. That's the part if you want the parasympathetic part. What do you need if you're just looking to convert white fat to brown fat? I don't know, but 60, 70 degrees, and then just stay in there. It doesn't have to be an ice bath, but you definitely need to be chilly. You need to have, goosebumps. If you can go all the way to almost shivering and cut off the shivering reflex, that's back to parasympathetic control. So that's too cold. Most people don't need that cold. So 60, 70, mildly uncomfortable, but just the more you do it, the easier it gets. And it'll get to the point where even in most people, just like the sound of the shower ramps their metabolism. It's just a reflex.
So she's not good at videoing during the life-threatening emergencies. We're working on that though. Anyway, so I'm sure there'll be a fun video to follow. She's up there. So that was a storm. That was a good one. Hail, I don't know, half inch. Like it hurt. It hurt. Lightning, the whole shabam. It's cold. We're at like 9,000 feet. Lena, come back so we can ride. Anyway, she just keeps walking, and she's walking faster than me because she doesn't have the bike. Anyway, I kept telling her to video, and she, and then the lightning, and then the no video of the actual event. So we'll work on that. But anyway, it's fun times. Spirits are high, and everything is wet and soaked. Basically like flash flood on this road. It's crazy, like out of nowhere, like foot of water just coming down the road. And of course our bike was sitting in the road, so everything's soaked. That's okay. Look, she's dancing in the road to stay warm. Wave! Anyway, on the way to Cuba.